Welcome to a video from digitallifestyle.com. In this video tutorial, we're talking about modulation. I'm going to be looking at how modulation is really the key to creating rich, deep, evolving synth sounds. I'm going to be recording this on the multi-poly, but this would work just as well on the mod wave or the wave state, or in fact any synth that supports modulation routing, even like the mini log up there, or any synth where you can say route one thing to another. Some synths call this virtual patch matrices. Some synths have physical patch panels where you can patch them in. But I'm going to be using this synth, but it's a kind of covers all areas. Okay, so what I started off with there is kind of a quite a complex sound, but what I'm going to do is we're going to look at each section of the synth and see how you can use modulation to do different effects. So I'm going to revert to a basic inner size patch so that we can start right at the beginning. Okay, so what is modulation? So that modulation is where you're taking one parameter on the synth. It could be the classic one is the filter cutoff, and then you modulate it via another parameter. So here's the filter cutoff, you can hear. I'm manually adjusting that. Modulation could be that you have that effect, that cutoff changed by something else. It could be an LFO, which is an oscillator in itself, a low frequency oscillator, a slow running oscillator that can change that for you rather than you having to manually tweak it. But it not just LFOs, we've got a lot of performance controls on modern synths and any synths. We've got the mod wheel, and this one we've got the Kaoss Pad, we've got mod controls, but we've got other options as well. We could control it by, say, velocity or polyphonic aftertouch or an envelope, all different things. So we're going to have a look at some of the things on there. So we've got sources and destinations. So the source could be the mod wheel, the destination could be the filter cutoff, that kind of thing. So let's have a look at the basics first, and we'll stick with the filter as I mentioned that. So here's our filter cutoff, and on this synth, on the multi-poly and the mod wave as well, it's actually pretty easy to hook these together. Some other synths, I'm thinking like the Radius or the MS2000. The MS2000 got behind it has got a virtual patch bay where you can say you can choose your source, which might be the mod wheel, and you can choose your destination, which would be the cutoff. And I think the MS2000 has 4 virtual patches. More synths have some have. I think the Radius over there has 8, and so on. Some like the Mini Logue has just a selector switch where you can choose the. You can't say use the mod wheel, but you could use the LFO to control the filter, or you could control the pitch, and so on. It's just a selector switch. So there's different ways. I'm going to stick to the multi-poly style on this. So I'm going to say here that this filter cutoff, I want it to be controlled by one of the controllers. So you can see there's the mod wheel, and we've actually got a percentage that it controls on this one. Most synths allow you to do that. So you can hear that filter coming in. Now you can also hear the LFO is routing to the pitch as well. So you see it on there. So actually, if I didn't want that, I could turn that off. So that's a simple example of just controlling that from the mod wheel. But let's do something a bit different. Let's have a look at the classic sort of LFO. So I'll go back to my filter. I'm going to remove that for now. Actually, on this synth, the LFO is already hooked up. So I've got there an amount which is the intensity. So nothing at the moment. If I increase that intensity. So now we can hear that intensity. So we can hear that LFO, there is filter LFO, is controlling that that filter. And the way that on the mod wave, the wave state, and the multiplier work, while that is coded in already for you, you can actually use that filter LFO for something entirely different. You could use it for pitch, you could use it for wavetable shifting or whatever. You're not tied down. So it's, although it's set there to control it, if you have that set at 0, you could use that filter to control that filter LFO to control something completely different. And you could also use something completely different to control the filter LFO. So you're not really tied down to it. And that's one of the great things about this these synths, is that you've got that flexibility. So anyway, you can hear, and you notice as well that they're not synced. So they've got a few different options here with the LFO. I could tempo sync it. So if a tempo sync it, instead of it being a frequency in hertz, it does it in time measured, which is really handy when you want to do, say, something that builds up over a bar or something like that. So if I had a kick drum going and then this would sweep in over it, something I can perhaps show you later. So you can choose that tempo synced or not. There's some interesting things you've got on these filters, on these LFOs. You can delay them a bit, so nothing kicks in, and then I think they can hear it. So if you combine these modulation options, so rather than just being completely on or off effectively based on that triangle wave, if you can have the filter open a bit and turn that intensity down. So I could actually just delay it slightly and then fade it in. So you can create that kind of effect. And the more you have this open, the more you'll hear when that's down. Incidentally, on here on the filter LFO, you've got all these different waveforms you could choose. So this is actually quite a good one. Especially if I turn them back off. You get quite an interesting effect. Or if you saw up, you can get that kind of effect. But you've got also these different ones. And you've got some random ones as well. Something else to note as well is you've got these sync options. So you notice the notes aren't synced up, but I can sync the notes. And then especially useful I find is the free running mode. So if you have it sync notes like that, the envelope, the LFO re-triggers. Let me show you what I mean. So let's put it on a slow one. It's re-triggering each time I play. So it's almost working like an envelope then. But what I could do is, if I do it on free running, that cycle doesn't stop. So at the moment we can't hear it, it's going to fade in. And even if I release and play it back out, it's just carrying on. So that's especially useful when you put on, say, an arpeggiator, and you want some sort of arpeggiated effect with the filter like that. So I really like that sort of effect, and I use that quite often. The free running like that. So that's how we've modulated the filter. Of course, we've got other parameters on there as well. We can modulate some resonance and so on. I'll show you something that's quite interesting as well, which you can do. We've got a few LFOs on here, and we can actually, you can modify one LFO with another. I'll show you what I mean, but what I'm going to do for now is just show that frequency. I'm going to control it through, let's go through the Kaoss Pad. So we've got our controllers, got Kaoss Y. I'm going to set it medium intensity. So if I go to the Kaoss Pad now, so you can hear our LFO, it's quite slow at the moment. You can hear that I sped up. So if I increase that intensity, we'll go from very slow to ridiculously fast. So it's about getting that intensity into a nice value that's controllable. So you can see there that you just we could modulate the frequency of LFO by another parameter, and then the LFO is modulating the cutoff. So that gives us a lot of options as well. But what I was saying about LFOs, you could even, I can take this filter B LFO and say I want filter 1's LFO to be modified by the filter B's LFO. So what does that do? Well, you can see the effect of it there. The frequency is being controlled by this frequency. So if I slow that down, you'll see, and I change that intensity up a little bit, the LFO should go faster and slower and faster and slower. Yeah, that's that sort of classic sound on there. So that's always interesting to do that kind of combination, and you can modify that frequency by something else. You've got more LFOs, you can use other things. So I'll leave that there for now. Let's put it down for now. The other, of course, thing you can do with envelopes, of course, the other thing you can do is you've got envelopes. So this is really the classic synth setup. Multipoly's got 4. Other synths quite often have 2, one for the VCA, the amplifier, and one for the filter. They're often hardwired. In our case, this is hardwired as well, virtually hardwired. You can see there we've got filter A there. So we got to the filter and it's actually under intensity on there. So if I turn that intensity up and the filter down, let's just turn the filter to no effect, right down like that. And I go to the filter envelope and I move that in. You can hear the effect of that filter. So that's the classic synth architecture. You can often have the envelope and the filter with different, the amplitude and the filter envelopes with different effects, with different times, and it gives you a different effect. So if I just raise the cutoff a bit so we can hear a bit of level. Right, there we go, I've got a bit of level, and I change that intensity up a little bit. Now if I just did the envelope with a slow attack, you'd hear it just fade in, whereas this, we hear we have got that initial attack and then it fades in. And of course I can put some release. And then you can tweak those intensities. So there we're using the classic sort of synth techniques of modifying the envelopes, or modifying the filter and the amplitude, the VCA, the VCF, with those envelopes on there. Modwave and multiplayer and Wavestate have got a few more options as well than the traditional ones. We've got some extra functions on there. In fact, on the multipoly, we can model different types of envelopes. So I could actually choose the Odyssey type envelope, or I could choose a monopoly envelope or a MS-20. There's the Pro Edge Prophet 5, there's a Mini Moog. So let's go for the Prophet 5 one. It's too bit subtle to hear the differences, but if we start changing the VCA to the Prophet 5 and the filter to the Prophet 5, we get a closer sound to the Prophet 5s, the way that these components are modeled. I've got a whole thing about reproducing virtual or reproducing analog synths on the multi-poly, but effectively you're modeling those components to get those effects, especially the filters. You can hear it through the filters. So one other thing I want to quickly show you as well on the filter side, let's change that filter to a very sharp attack. One thing you can do for modulation on the filters is you can also trigger them. So you can re-trigger that filter, and we'll look at sequencing later. I've got a full video on motion sequencing, which can be quite complex, but I'll show you some brief bits on that. But what we could actually can get that envelope to re-trigger on any of these parameters. So a sequencer can trigger it. MIDI CC can trigger the envelope. One I quite like is damper. So my foot on the damper switch is controlling that. But what you could do is you could trigger it from an LFO. So let's trigger it from the, we'll use the filter LFO because we're not using it for anything at the moment. So when the filter LFO level gets above 50, it'll trigger the envelope. So we'll look at the LFO. We've got it quite slow at the moment, and it's being controlled by the frequency of there. So let's, oh, there you go, you can hear it start kicking down. If I take off that modulation and change the speed of it, and especially if I tempo sync it, and then you can combine it with the other parameter. So there you can see that I've used that envelope there and an LFO to trigger the envelope. So an interesting effect on there. One other thing I like to do often with modulations as well, especially on something that I think is harder to do on a traditional synth, is things like the decay of that envelope. You can actually modify that. So if I bring that down and I can say I want the velocity to affect the envelope. So the harder the velocity, the longer that envelope should stay open. It's a bit extreme at that, so let's dial that back a bit. So you can do it very soft, it's a little bit. So you've got options like that as well. I often like to combine that with an LFO as well, so to make that decay open a bit longer on a tempo synced LFO as well, so it gives you an interesting effect. Let's have a look. So let's go with it. Oscillator filter B's, one will do. Tempo sync it, and we go back to our envelope. Put our decay time to be controlled by filter B. And it's a bit short at times, isn't it? So I'll just increase the decay. Maybe decrease that intensity. And of course, there is another thing you can do is if that I can do a sort of an offset, so that raises the floor, so it never goes that low. It's raising that lowest level. So an interesting effect there. So we've not used any motion sequence or anything else. We're just using tempo synced LFOs to get those effects. Now, in terms of modulation as well, I mentioned that we've got the Kaoss Pad, we've got these 4 knob controls as well, which we can assign to, and they can do multiple jobs. So I could assign that to the mod 1 to be the resonance. Let's hold something down. So that's controlling the resonance, but it doesn't have to just do that as well. You can actually also assign it to something else. So let's have a look over here on the oscillator side now. So I'm moving over to the oscillator. I could choose a detuned sawtooth. I'll set the detuning to be low, like that, and I'm going to make the mod control 1 also do some detuning. So it's going to do resonance and detuning. I can make that more extreme. So that's another option we've got on there. Now when it comes to oscillators, we've got loads we can do with modulation on oscillators. So I'm going to save this now and just call this filter LFO. So I'm just going to switch back to innate performance now, and we'll leave the filters and just look at some of the oscillator side, things we can do with the oscillator. So we've got 4 oscillators on the multi-poly mod wave as 2. The wave state has sort of sequencing, wave sequencing, and so you can modify things, but it does have the traditional single sample as well. So let's have a look at what we can modify on here. You can't modify the waveform, that's like a fix. So think of it like on the mini low, it's a switch. We've got quite a lot of options though. So even on a basic sawtooth, we can control the pitch. We've got the option to send it through 2 different filters as well. We'll perhaps have a look at that later. But pulse is a classic one. You've got the pulse width, and if I show you on here, there you can see the width. It's like a square wave, and you take it down to a small pulse width, like sort of 90% type thing. Sounds completely different, but that sweeping through the pulse width is a nice classic synth technique, and it's very simple on here. It's already mapped with this oscillator here, this low LFO, so I can put that. And before people complain on the video that the filters sound harsh, I'm leaving the filter open on this, but of course if I can get a nice soft filter, all these filters sound quite nice soft. I have no effects as well on these. Anyway, we'll leave the filters alone for now. So there you go, you can hear pulse width there, and that's just controlling the LFO speed. LFO speed from there, and the amount. If you do it too much, you get down to 0%, which you can see in there, which is also a useful tool I found when I was doing the Prophet 5 reproductions. A couple of their techniques were to fade the oscillator in by going to 0% or 100% on the pulse width, so you couldn't hear it, and then introduce it. Kind of like that effect. But the other thing that we could do on the multiplier, we've got a detuned sawtooth. So we can control that detuning. We can use the LFO for it. Or you could make a detune button or control with, say, that mod control, something I've done quite often, especially if you've got 4 layers running. You can have 4 layers all being controlled by this one control if you want. So you can detune the 4 layers or all 4 oscillators at the same time. So it's quite handy for that. So while you've got the detune button there, if you've got 4 oscillators you want to detune at the same time, you can just map them all to control 1, and then you can control 4 oscillators at the same time. Let me show you. So there's a detune. It's all at 12%. So I'm just going to put that to be mod 1, and let's do it as 100%. And mod 1. I could be a bit clever and say do it at 99%, or it's detuned between 0 and 50, isn't it, on this? So like, oh, it's detuned between 0 and 100, so you can control it like that. So you see here now. So that's great for performance controls. That you can sort of change that real time rather than diving into the editor to change it. That detune. But there's other things you could do. You can control that second oscillator volume level and so on. The other things we've got as well is we've got all these digital waveforms, which are really brilliant as well. Let's have a look. One of my favorite ones is the DW8000. So it's the classic DW8000 wavetables. You can switch through them with the position control. You can hear how you can smoothly transition through those. That one. Actually, if you want a really digital effect, you can turn off that cross fading, and you control that, and you can control that from something else. So that position is something you could control through poly aftertouch with a remote keyboard. The keyboard itself doesn't have poly aftertouch. The mod whale, the Kaoss button, just the act of tapping the button, or any of these other things on here. So let's go with the Kaoss Y. Let's put some smooth transitions. In fact, let's not. Let's leave the transitions off and put it on Kaoss X. Let's see what that sounds like. It's going to sound quite digital. So I think we go up and down through them. And if we go... So if we go up and down them over here, it smoothly goes through them. And there, it goes through them. So you've got those wave controlling the wavetables like that. I often like doing those through LFO as well. So let's drop the Kaoss for now and put a nice smooth one with one of the generators. Let's because we've looked at LFO, let's look at envelopes. Let's use one of these other envelopes. We've got 4 envelopes. I could be using all these for something else. I don't think I'll be using the pitch one, so I'm just going to use that one. So if I go to the pitch envelope now, so that's going through without any smooth transitioning. If I bring that Kaoss over, so it's up to you how you want to control it, but there are some really good wavetables on here to play with, and you can import your own as well. That's probably an entire separate video, bringing your own in there, but there's a great vocal one I really like. It's a good example. But there's loads built in. And here's one I brought in my own. That's the MS2000 one. So you can see you've got loads of great wavetables on here, and you can modify them using LFOs, using filters, key controls, however you want. And the other thing we've got oscillators as well, which is one thing I'm still learning, is the wave shaper ones, this sort of West Coast style. So this is almost additive. So there are some really great sounding oscillators on here, and you can get some great effects without using any filter. just get some really nice effects like that. So I'm going to do a separate video on wave shaping once I feel I can actually talk about it with some authority. So almost like FM and all sorts with that as well. The other thing is that the basics, which you can do as well, which I didn't mention earlier on. If I just go to, let's go to 2 pulse width. We'll turn off our modulation on that. Let's just set that as 50. So I've got 2 exactly the same pitch. But the other thing you can do, I've just put on the 2 pulse ones, is you could control the tuning. We can use that pitch envelope, which I mentioned earlier on. We can have a bit of pitch envelope on that and it will go out of tune. That sounds not so useful at that. When you get it subtle, it sounds quite nice. And then if you, instead of using a pitch envelope, you use one of the LFOs, you can get a nice sort of subtle sound from it. We've got LFO here, yeah. You want it to be quite subtle, I think, on that really low value. If you bring that speed down as well, it's almost like building a bit of drift into the oscillators, get that analog feel. So it works quite well for that, but you don't have to use it for that. One interesting thing you can do, if I go really crazy with it, okay, sounds pretty terrible. Turn on the sync. You get that classic sync sound. And if I can show you, you can see the waveform there as the cycle re-triggers based off as the oscillator 2 is trying to increase its pitch, or is increasing its pitch, but it's synced to oscillator 1, which is fixed. The pitch stays the same, and you get that great sweep effect. So really nice. A really nice effect on that. You can also use it even for things like the transposition or the oscillator or anything. So you've got that control over it. Mentioned earlier about filters and the 2 filters. So we've got 2 filters here. So let's just let's go back to a detune saw for now. In fact, we'll have 1 detune and 1 pulse. And if I get our filter envelope and increase the intensity, and in fact, let's have some release on it as well. Okay, so there's our filter. We've got 2 filters on the multi-poly. You can choose the different models as well. So you can have a SEM filter like Oberheim, and a multi-poly one, or maybe MS-20. Probably more interesting is if you combine it, say, with a high-pass filter. So if I turn that on now, they're in serial, so one goes through the other. So if I turn it off first, you'll hear through the high-pass. You won't hear very much because the high-pass is cutting it all out. But yeah, you can hear a bit of high-pass and a bit of effect on there. But if I put it into parallel, it's all going through filter A, but I can choose that this one goes through filter B. And maybe if I change it to a low pass, And we could say filter B has got the opposite style envelope. So on filter B, I could have a very short envelope. So straight away you can hear you've got a pulse width going through a short envelope. Let's give it a bit of sustain as well, and I'll give it a bit of sustain. So if you play it like that, you've got a very short envelope. If you sustain the note, you hear that detuned saw coming in through the other filter. This modulation there, you could control that with that. Let's put it on mod control, so I can turn it right down. So there, I'm controlling that. So there, I'm controlling the AB of the filter through the mod control. So manually controlling that through mod control, so you can make it into a performance control. So actually, I'd already used mod 1, haven't I, for controlling that detune. So that's a good example of combining it. Incidentally, on these mod controls as well, they're like a balance control. If these mod controls are plus and minus ones, so like you get 0 at the center, minus 50, plus 50. If you don't want it to that, you just want it to be a linear 0 to 150, you can change it like that, and then it's 0 to 150. So that's worth remembering that as well. One other thing I should mention as well, these mod processes, I'm not going to go into too much on this video, but these mod processes is a great way of changing the values from one source and apply it to another. It could be that you want to combine a value between, say, combining the mod wheel and one of the mod processors, so that only the effects, so you get the mod wheel controls, say, the speed, but you only get having any effect if you've turned that up, or some things like that. Or you could be that key scaling you can use, so the key scaling value that goes up, you can have it a different scale, you can have it flipped around or something like that, and you use these mod processors. But I'm going to do a separate video on that, so stay subscribed and I'll talk about that. We'll look at motion sequence in a second, but I've not got any effects on, but I just wanted to show you a couple of bits you can do with modulation on effects as well. So let me go to this chorus. The wet dry. Now this is slightly different on these because they are applied across the 4 layers. So most of everything in fact we looked at so far is on a per layer basis, and we got 4 layers, so we can stack up 4 different sounds. The effects one is kind of global. It's across the across all 4 layers, so you get less controls to apply them, because it wouldn't make sense to say to apply an LFO from layer A to a global performance across all 4 layers. So you get less options, but you have got all these. So here you can see the mod wheel, for example. I can control the chorus, the dry, wet, dry values as well. Let's have a look at chorus, say controlling that chorus. So there's a chorus. Let's choose a nice stereo chorus. I'm going to tune my detuning down a lot. There we go. Okay, so we've got some chorus on there. So 40, 60 at the moment. But what I can do is I can control that by something else. So let's just do the mod wheel and turn the intensity right up. Let's not do that. Let's control that chorus value with mod 2. So it's off, fully wet. So you can control things like, and you can go through the depth, the speed of the chorus. So that speed of the chorus as well, I could be controlled by the Kaoss Pad. And so on. And it's not just that as well. You can also do it on the reverbs. Actually, quite interesting if you control the speed of a tape delay. If I mess with that. because it's a tape emulator tape delay, if you control that speed, let's put that on the x axis on the Kaoss. And if I make that bit pronounced, and so on, all the way up to the reverb levels. There's, for the master reverb, let's have a nice symphonic hall. We can send each layer can be controlled separately. So again, you've got the all these different options to control that. So we've not used knob 3, have we? So let's. So that's how you can use those on the effects. And I'm just going to back these effects now. So right, so now we'll go back to a simple sound. We can stick with that one for now. Just to mention motion sequencing, I've got a full video on motion sequencing. So motion sequencing is you control the notes, the timing lengths, and any of these parameters through the sequencer. You can record it or you can program it. So it could be as simple as, let's have a bit of sequencing with the filter cutoff being changed. So I've got 4 lanes to choose from plus the pitch lane, but I'm going to use sequence A. It's ready to record. Hold a note and start doing whatever I do, and it'll record it. So you can hit. You can see. So that's recorded that. So that has already set up that routine for us. If I go into there, you can see that sequence A, it's got 142. So there you can see sequence A, full intensity, and those are the parameters. I can change those parameters. And so on. You can make it change the pitch. You can change the timing of these things. Like I said, I've got a separate video on that. Here is an example of more complex one, I think. So you can hear pitch being affected and multiple layers on that. You can see here that I've got that the level switching is being one of the oscillators is being controlled. So you can control anything. So this is a good example, but you can really set all sorts upon there. So that's my look at modulation. There's a hell of a lot of things you can do with it. Most parameters, nearly all the parameters, can be changed through modulation. There are some things you can't, like you can't change the waveform types and things like that, but you can change all these values. You can cross modulate, you can change the common pitch, there's a unison detune mode, you can change all that. You can control anything through the motion sequencer, through knob controls, through the Kaoss Pad, foot controls, key scaling, poly aftertouch via MIDI, CC messages, all be stepped through on there. So there's a huge amount you can do with it, and it's really a case of experimenting with it. So I hope this helps. Please let me know what you think. Email me ian@thislifestyle.com or leave comments, or like the video if you like the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.